Why do they kill poor animals? La corrida de toros, literal translation, coursing of the bulls. It's a cultural thing. They call it La Fiesta Nacional. They celebrate it? Not all. For many it's La Vergüenza Nacional, shame. Many Spaniards turned against bullfighting a long time ago and even tried to ban it in some communities, but the Constitutional Court ruled that no one can ban any kind of spectacle that is legal in Spain. Galicia at least succeeded to ban minors under 12 from attending bullfighting events. At least, can be traumatic to watch it, like watching a grandpa killing a pig as a kid, but that was for food. What is their justification for blood? They refer to it as a national heritage, an art. The only art in which the artist is in danger of death, wrote Hemingway. I don't get it. Can they still face the danger without killing a bull? Yes, like in Mexico or Bolivia, where killing is forbidden. Alright. What is Spain? Spain is located on the Iberian Peninsula. The Greeks called this region Iberia, meaning the land behind the Ebro River, which, along with the Pyrenees Mountains, almost cuts the peninsula off from the continent. What were the Greeks doing there? They had colonies almost everywhere. Other seafarers were the Canaanites, who originated from the Canaan civilization in the southern Levant region. They founded the oldest city of Spain, Cadiz, as well as Malaga. The Greeks called them Phoenicians. These are the people who founded the Carthage Empire. The Romans called them Punic. The Phoenicians had another word for Iberia, Hispanim, meaning the land of rabbits. Hispanim, Hispania, Spain. You got it. Why rabbits? It is a scientific fact that the peninsula is the native home of the European rabbit. Rome crushed Carthage, expanded, and by 20 BC, Iberia was fully conquered. The population became culturally Romanized. Latin was brought to the region, and amid a mixture of local cultures, the Spanish language and Portuguese began to evolve. I see. Valencia, Barcelona, and Zaragoza were founded. The Roman Empire spread widely. Its limits were marked by the Rhine and Danube rivers. Because of its vast territories, Rome could not maintain centralized rule over distant lands, so it was about to split. The process was triggered by the Huns, who came from Mongolian steppe. These fierce nomads initiated a great migration. Fleeing Goths crossed the Danube River and settled in the Balkans, where they rebelled, weakening the Roman Empire. And in 395 AD, it was divided into the eastern and the western halves. Do you follow? Yes, nomads messed it all up. Some of the Goths pressed on to the west and sacked Rome in 410. Then they got some land from the Romans, just before the Pyrenees Mountains, where they established the kingdom of the Visigoths, Western Goths. In 476, the Western Roman Empire disintegrated. The Visigoths began their advance into Hispania, the Roman word for the peninsula. At the same time, Franks crossed the Rhine River and moved into Gallia, driving the Visigoths further south. In 625, Visigoths eventually unified Iberia under Catholic Christianity. Islam reached Gibraltar Strait in 711. In 8 years, Arabized Berbers of the Maghreb region, the Moors controlled almost the entire territory of the Iberian Peninsula. Whoa, surprise, surprise. They called it Al-Andalus. Today the southern community of Spain is called Andalusia. Alright, some relations, I like it. Visigothic nobles took refuge in the Cantabrian mountains where, with local Asturian people, they formed Kingdom of Asturia. With them, Reconquista started. Oh, I heard about it. Reconquering their land, right? You got it. It lasted 800 years. Wow. The Kingdom of Navarre emerged. The Asturian king moved the capital to Leon and became the Kingdom of Leon. Navarre fragmented and the Kingdom of Aragon emerged. The Castile county split off from the Kingdom of Leon and became the Kingdom of Castile and so on. Another county, the County of Portugal, was also separated, and the Kingdom of Portugal was established. Like, they became independent? Yeah, sort of. Like, Portugal? Ooh. The County of Barcelona broke free from the Franks and united with the Kingdom of Aragon into the Crown of Aragon. Castile united back with Leon and formed the Crown of Castile. and along with the crown of Aragon, they slowly regained the lands from the Moors. Aragon invaded Sicily, beginning over 400 years of Spanish influence, Sardinia in 1420, along with Corsica and the Kingdom of Naples in 1442. The last Muslim stronghold, the Emirate of Granada, was taken. Reconquista has come to an end. Alright, they got everything back. What was the next plan? This is Ptolemy's map from 150 AD, showing the only known world at the time. And this is the first ever globe map, the Haim globe of 1492. As you can see, there is no American continent on it. People didn't know it existed. The old world knew nothing about the new one, and vice versa. Europe thought that across the Atlantic there was just Asia. Interesting. So what was the plan? To go to Asia? With Ottomans taking over Constantinople in 1453 and the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, the land trade with Asia was cut off. Portugal was the first to start looking for the sea route, and by 1488 they reached the tip of Africa. And Spain? And Spain could not follow the same route. They were forbidden to sail south. Okay. And so they would go west, across the ocean. Smart. Right, they already knew the world was a globe, but they didn't know how big it was, how far away India was, and about an entirely new continent they were yet to discover. I know, Christopher Columbus, right? Right, he would discover America, but ironically, he would remain convinced it was Asia. But did you know that he was not Spanish? Then, how did he sail for Spain? He was a Genoese Italian. Genoa was a maritime city-state with trade colonies scattered around the Mediterranean. One of them was in Portugal. There, Columbus tried to persuade the Portuguese king to sponsor his ambitious expedition to India by going west. But Portugal, by then having already reached the tip of Africa, had India just around the corner, as they thought, which it was, in a way. So they screwed him. Yeah, he went to Spain instead, and they struck a deal. So Spain now had a chance to get to India too, though going into the unknown. And why couldn't they go south, you said? The dispute started with the Spanish conquest of the Canary Islands. And later, when the king of Castile died, his daughter, Joanna, married to the Portuguese king, and his half-sister, Isabella, married to the king of Aragon, warred with each other over the Castilian crown. Eventually, they made a deal. Isabella gets the crown and the Castilian land, and Joanna, meaning Portugal, gets the hegemony over the sea. This was the Treaty of Alcáçovas. Thus, Castile united with Aragon, and Portugal secured exclusive rights to navigate, conquer, and trade in all the Atlantic Ocean, south of the Spanish Canary Islands. In August 1492, Columbus, following the trade winds, sailed on. In 2 months, he landed on what is believed to be San Salvador Island of the modern-day Bahamas. Here, locals presented him with a tobacco leaf. Tobacco was unknown in the old world. And what people used to smoke before that? They didn't, actually. You're kidding. No. I know, it's crazy. What else did they find here that was unknown? Overall, Spanish conquistadors brought potato, corn, tomato, cacao beans, chocolate. No potato? It's crazy. What did they eat, man? Alright, anything else? Pumpkin, chili pepper. There was no pepper as well? There was black pepper from Asia, but that is seeds, and this one is a fruit. It's a totally different species. Why then we call them both pepper? That's a historical mistake. When Columbus was fed with a meal spiced with the chili pepper, it tasted similarly hot, and so, thinking he was in Asia, he called it pepper too, and so the name stuck. Okay, same as we call Native Americans Indians, right? Exactly. And what was unknown to the New World? Wheat, rice, apple. They knew no horses, cattle, sheep, or goats, no chicken. No chickens? So then, the chicken or egg first question was totally irrelevant in America. They had turkey instead. Okay, crazy. What was even crazier was the exchange of germs. Deadly exchange. Diseases. Conquistadors brought measles, smallpox, and influenza, and took syphilis back. This caused a demographic catastrophe known as the Great Dying. reducing the indigenous population of Americas by 80-90% in 100 years. Oh man. The expedition discovered Cuba and the island of Hispaniola before it returned. When the old world learned of the new discoveries, Portugal raised concerns about its hegemony. The dispute was resolved by drawing a demarcation line 2,000 kilometers west of Capo Verde, nearly halfway to the islands visited by Christopher. Everything discovered west of this line would now belong to Spain, from pole to pole. It was the Treaty of Tordesillas. Just like that. In September 1493, Columbus set out on his second voyage. They settled what would become the capital of Dominican Republic, Santo Domingo, named so because they arrived there on Sunday. Their primary goal was gold, and the local peaceful Taino people had some. Columbus offered them protection from another native people, the fierce Caribs. That's Caribbean? And cannibalism too. Caribs were cannibals, and the word actually derives from their name too. The Tainos called them Cariba. Spaniards picked it up as Caniba, and so cannibal, a person who eats human flesh. They reconnoitered the region for 2 years and named Dominica, Guadalupe, Montserrat, Antigua, San Martin, Saint Bartholomew, Saint Kitts, and Saint Nevis. Interesting fact is that due to confusion, Saint Martin was mistakenly misplaced with Saint Nevis on future maps. So it could have been Saint Kitts and Martin instead? The third voyage brought Columbus onto the continent. They discovered the delta of the Orinoco River. They named Trinidad too. From this voyage, Columbus returned home not as a free man, but in chains, contained in the hold of a ship, accused of slavery, rapes and robberies, and depriving of the rights of the local people. Wow. Yeah, but the Queen pardoned him, and on his fourth voyage, Columbus scouted a big chunk of the Central American coast before being shipwrecked on Jamaica for a year, with his 14-year-old son Ferdinand, but rescued eventually. He was 51. In 3 years, feeling betrayed, he died in Valladolid, Spain. Betrayed? Yes, his son would write. He never forgot the ordeal. I always saw those irons in his bedroom, which he demanded be buried with his bones. Anyway, his followers were no better. Out of the approximately 300,000 Indians in Hispaniola at the time of the first voyage, only 6,000 were reported by census in 1508, and only 500 were found in 1548. Yeah, other expeditions followed. One of them carried another Italian explorer, Amerigo Vespucci. On his first trip, they reached Lake Maracaibo, where they found indigenous stilt houses which reminded Vespucci of Venice, and so they called it Venezuela, meaning Little Venezia. Wow, interesting. On his second voyage, Amerigo explored the continent extensively and sailed as far as Patagonia. Unlike Columbus, he believed they struck not Asia, but an entirely new continent. He would write and publish a descriptive pamphlet called Mundus Novus, Latin for New World. After that, one German cartographer would publish the Universalis Cosmographia, a massive 12-page world map. This was the first map to use the name America. The name honored Vespucci, but when the cartographer learned that Vespucci did not discover the land, he renamed it Terra Incognita. But by this time, about 1,000 copies of the original had been distributed. The name America stuck. We live in a fake world. Indians are not Indians, pepper is not pepper, and America is not America. It should have been North and South Colombia, and the United States of Colombia. And Colombia? Yes, in his name. Okay, at least something. They settled Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Darien region in modern Panama, first settlement in Cuba, discovery of Florida. They named it so because it was Easter, observed in Spain as Pascua Florida, Festival of Flowers. Alright. And back in Europe, Spain gained some lands too. They annexed Navarre and conquered the tiny peninsula of Melilla, which is in present-day Morocco. Until this day, Melilla is a Spanish town within Morocco. Can't Morocco claim it back? It cannot. Melilla was not conquered from Morocco. There was no Morocco back then. but different kingdoms, and Melilla belonged to neither of them, but rather some barbaric pirates that bothered the Spanish coast from time to time. I see. Interesting. Yep. Also, 19-year-old Spanish King Charles V was crowned the Holy Roman Emperor. He was elected as a heir of the Habsburg dynasty, one of the most powerful dynasties in the history of Europe. They possessed the lands that comprised a collection of kingdoms, duchies, and other counties. Charles inherited these lands too, after his grandfather, the Habsburg ruler Maximilian I, died. Well, the New World was yet to be figured out. It had no Indian spices. In all, the most expensive was cloves, worth their weight in gold. Like the cloves we used to make glue wine? Exactly. It only grew in the Maluku Islands, Indonesia, which were called the Spice Islands. Okay. And Fernand Magellan promised he could locate the strait through the new continent and eventually reach the islands. Spain gave him 5 ships and 260 men, and blessed his expedition that set out to become the first circumnavigation of the globe. Did they succeed? Yes, in 3 years, but not all of them. Only 1 ship and 18 men returned. Wow. What about the rest? Perished, including Magellan. In September 1519 they set sail. Magellan was 39. In the Canaries, they learned that the King of Portugal had sent 2 fleets to arrest him. Why? Magellan was Portuguese. Yes, but the Portuguese king refused to back up his expedition for years. This Portuguese king, man. This induced Magellan to deviate from the usual western course and sail hag in Africa, in Portuguese waters instead, until the headwind eventually forced them to turn west. Next, they got caught in the Doldrums, the belt around the earth near the equator where sailing ships sometimes get stuck in the windless waters. Why? Here the prevailing trade winds of the northern hemisphere blow to the southwest and collide with the southern hemisphere winds blowing northwest. It's like 2 rivers flow toward each other. It creates turbulence. On top, due to the intense solar heating near the equator, the warm, moist air is forced up into the atmosphere. That's why there is often little surface wind here. I see. But that's not it. As the air rises, it cools, causing persistent bands of showers and storms around the Earth's midsection, and thus waterless waters on one hand and frequent, violent thunderstorms and heavy rain on the other. Wow. Magellan's fleet wandered here for 40 days, beaten by storms. The South Equatorial Current eventually carried the fleet west to Cape St. Augustine. On December 13, they approached the mouth of the River of January, Rio de Janeiro. Oh, okay. Then they reached Rio de la Plata, present-day Buenos Aires, thinking that it could be the strait. Why was he so sure he could find that strait? The existence of the passage was believed to be feasible. There was even a report of one secret Portuguese expedition which sailed south and probably entered and even navigated the strait through, but was turned by civil storms. It was somewhere around 1511. But charts were classified. An unauthorized individual caught with a sea map could be punished with death. But again, Magellan was a Portuguese navigator. He might have known something no one in Spain knew. On 31st March, they found a shelter to wait through the winter. How was it? They lost a ship to a storm. He was sent to reconnoiter the coast further south. The crew shipwrecked, but all were rescued eventually. Did they encounter locals? Yes, they called them Patagonia, Bigfoot giants, the name for a monster from the Spanish novel. Hence Patagonia. In the southern spring in October, they resumed the search and in 3 days, they found it. They plunged in, but faced a nautical nightmare. It took over a month to navigate 300 miles through the maze of channels and islets. It is considered one of the greatest feats in the history of maritime exploration. The strait now bears Magellan's name. He also gave name to Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire. Why so? They saw many fires on land. Local settlements? Apparently. Anyways, in the strait, another ship, San Antonio, mutinied and abandoned the expedition. It had most of their provisions. Could they replenish it? They were in barren land, and the weather in those latitudes unforgivable. Upon exiting the strait, they sailed on along the Chilean coast before they turned west. They thought that India was just 2-3 weeks away. No one could imagine that they entered the largest body of water in the world, which covers 30% of the Earth's surface. Crazy. It's vast, but There are islands, right? Did they replenish? Didn't they? They did, but only on the 98th day after they exited the strait. What? 98th day? Yep. What? How did they survive? No landings whatsoever? They sighted only 2 small uninhabited islands on the way. The first landfall occurred on January 24, and it was just a simple atoll with no fresh water, Puka Puka, Tuamotu archipelago of French Polynesia. On February 4th, they spotted another island, Flint or Caroline Islands, Kiribati, but the water was too deep for anchoring and impenetrable reef repelled the ship. Unbelievable. Had their course varied by only a few degrees south, they would have been able to explore Easter Island or further west, the Society Islands and Tahiti. Had their course varied by only a few degrees north, they might have eventually encountered the Marquesas or Christmas Island. So, how did they survive with their limited supplies? They ate oxen skin that covered the yards of the masts. Ah, man. They left them in the sea for 4 or 5 days and then placed them briefly on hot charcoals. That is crazy. They ate sawdust from boards too, and rats, which was a luxury. They believed that eating them might offer protection against scurvy. Is it? There is some truth to this. Unlike humans, rats synthesize and store vitamin C. 29 men died. Deliverance finally came when they landed on Guam on the 98th day. Fucking crazy. At least they had steady winds behind their back and calm weather. Thus, they called the ocean Pacific. Shortly after, they spotted Samar Island, Philippines, and then Cebu, which finally resembled civilization. Finally. For Magellan, it was the final destination. What happened? He baptized the islanders. Those who disobeyed, he threatened to kill. He started burning their huts too. One of his chieftains on the small neighboring Mactan Island, Lapu Lapu, had stubbornly resisted converting to Christianity. Cebuans offered Magellan assistance to fight Lapu Lapu, their enemy, but Magellan refused the offer and said he wanted them to see how the Spanish lions hunt their prey, saying that one armored Spaniard was worth the 100 naked men. The shallow water of Mactan Bay forbade the armada from coming close to the shore, so 50 armed Europeans came in on boats instead, and from the jungles emerged 1,500 men, ready to fight to their death. Armored, Magellan got a poisoned arrow in his naked right leg. Next, he was wounded in his arm by a bamboo spear. Next, the prey rushed onto him and finished him. It was April 27, 1521. Unbelievable. Today, this Mactan Bay is called Magellan Bay, and there is a giant statue of victorious Lapu Lapu. Only 2 ships eventually reached the Spice Islands. On the way, they met Arabs and visited Brunei, and on November 8, after 27 months, the Armada de Molucca entered the harbor of Tidore, one of only 5 islands in the entire world where cloves were growing, all in the Moluccas. Here, the Spaniards learned that the Portuguese had already found and been trading in this place for years, after discovering India in 1498. And so the Spaniards had to hurry up to not get caught, but Trinidad, one of the 2 surviving ships, had been leaking heavily and needed extensive repairs. They decided to send the other one, Victoria, home alone, and after another 8 months at sea, and half of the crew lost to scurvy again, it entered Seville on September 10, 1522, completing the first circumnavigation of the globe. They brought 26 tons of cloves. It is said that this not only covered the cost of the expedition, but even made a profit. Out of 260 men, only 18 returned. Jesus. And the other ship, what happened to the rest? Trinidad had spent 6 months on repairs. The plan was to retract the Pacific route and go to Darien, the settlement on the Panama Isthmus. They wandered in the Pacific for 5 months, slowly giving way to scurvy, and they decided to turn back. When they arrived at the Moluccas, the Portuguese were there, looking for Magellan, and the Spaniards were thrown into prison. Till what point did the Portuguese waters extend to the east by the Treaty of Tordesillas? Good question. Now that Spain and Portugal collided on the other side of the world, they had to negotiate once again. Thus, the 1529 Treaty of Zaragoza was signed. To resolve the dispute, the Spanish king sold all the rights to the Moluccas Island to Portugal for 15 times the cost of the Magellan Expedition. The second demarcation line was drawn. And the Philippines? They give up on them too? No, even though now it was in the Portuguese sphere, Spain would claim them in a few decades, rightly guessing that Portugal would not object, since the archipelago had no spices. They would also claim the Marianas Islands later, and the Caroline Islands too. On the other side of the world, the Aztec Empire fell to the Spaniards. The Viceroyalty of New Spain was created with the capital in present-day Mexico City. The Mayan kingdom fell, with some exclaves surviving for a bit. Malta was given to some knights to govern themselves. The Inca Empire fell too, and Viceroyalty of Peru was created with the capital in Lima. The Spanish king abdicated. He gave his younger brother the Holy Roman Empire and the Habsburg lands of Austria. And Spain and the Low Countries, modern-day Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg, went to his only surviving son, Philip II, in whose name the Philippines were named shortly after. The Low Countries revolted, starting the 80 Wars War, also known as the Dutch War of Independence. The Portuguese dynastic directorial line became extinct, and the War of Portuguese Succession started. Spanish King Philip II, through family ties, also became King of Portugal. Spain and Portugal united in the Iberian Union, but in 1640, Portugal revolted and took its crown back. This is when the Portuguese stronghold town of Ceuta on the North African coast chose to remain with Spain after the union ended. Now Ceuta, along with Melilla, is a Spanish autonomous enclave in Morocco. France, backing Dutch revolts, declared war on Spain and occupied Martinica and Guadeloupe, and has had them as its overseas territory to this day. The French settled on St. Lucia and Grenada, as well on the western shore of Hispaniola, which had been depopulated by the Spanish exploitation. The war with France ended with the Treaty of Pyrenees in 1659. The northern part of Catalonia was ceded to France, permanently establishing the border between the two countries, with the tiny Principality of Andorra as an independent buffer state between them. Jamaica and the Cayman Islands were invaded by the British, who had already been present in the New World since 1607. British settlements on St. Kitts, Nevis and Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda and Montserrat, Anguilla and the Bahamas. The Spanish king died, leaving no children. The world of the Spanish succession started. Here is when the Brits snatched Gibraltar, which eventually was legally ceded to England to secure British withdrawal from the war. Brits also took Minorca, but will give it back later. Spain had to cede Luxembourg and Belgium and possessions in Italy to the Holy Roman Empire, so it could drop out of the war too. These treaties allowed the king's nephew, Philip V, to get the Spanish crown, but as a member of the powerful French Bourbon dynasty, he was made to renounce his claims to the French throne to ensure that two powers would not merge. Instead, to strengthen at least what he had gained, the new king merged all the remaining Aragonian kingdoms under the crown of Castile, establishing the Kingdom of Spain as a centralized state. In the New World, France and England collided in the 7 Years' War. The French, which went in from the north through the Great Lakes and down the Mississippi River to the Mexican Gulf, fought with the British, who took the coast. Spain sided with France due to its Bourbon dynasty ties and eventually lost Florida. France lost much of its possessions to England too, but gave the western part of its Louisiana territory to Spain as a compensation for Spain's alliances. Financially exhausted Britain decided that its American colonies could pay for the war, imposing heavy taxes. This led to the American War of Independence. 13 British colonies broke off and declared independence on the famous day of July 4, 1776. Spain sided with the United States and regained Florida and Minorca, but granted the Brits rights to cut logwood in what became known as British Honduras, later Belize. Present-day Equatorial Guinea was ceded by Portugal to Spain in exchange for Portugal's expansion westward in South America, far beyond the line of Tordesillas. Spain needed more slaves for its vast western territories. The French Revolution started, sweeping out the monarchy and establishing a republic. King Louis XVI was publicly executed by guillotine. European powers sought to restore the French monarchy, and Republican France declared war on them, including Spain, War of the Pyrenees. As a result, Spain lost the entire island of Hispaniola to France. In the War of the Second Coalition, Spain sided with France and lost Trinidad to Britain. Moreover, Spain agreed to return the Louisiana territory to France too, and in 1803, France sold it to the USA. after the slaves of Hispaniola rebelled, eventually and successfully declaring Haiti independent. Do you follow? I mean, yes, but the lands had changed hands like crazy. Indeed, the proper Spain was threatened too. One of the generals of the French Revolutionary Army, Napoleon Bonaparte, became the emperor of the French Empire. He made peace with Russia and implemented the Continental Blockade, a large-scale embargo against the British Empire. The only British ally was Portugal, so France invaded it through Spain. The vast amount of French troops on Spanish soil gave Napoleon the pretext to occupy the still Bourbon Spain, installing his own brother as the King of Spain. Fierce Spanish resistance started, which would become the Spanish War of Independence. Spanish overseas colonies also refused to accept Joseph Bonaparte as their new king and began breaking away themselves while Spain was weakened. Oh, I see. First was Paraguay. After it, Argentina declared independence, then Chile. Florida became a burden and was sold to the USA. In the same year, Gran Colombia was formed. Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, and part of Peru. First without Panama, then Panama joined it. Mexico became independent. The Federal Republic of Central America was formed by Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Bolivia, Peru, Uruguay. Everything began to crumble. Everything. In Europe, Napoleon was eventually defeated and exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in South Atlantic, where after 6 years he died of stomach cancer, aged 51. During the War of Independence, Spain adopted its first constitution, establishing a constitutional monarchy that limited the king's power. However, the next king abolished the constitution, and Spain descended in the deadly civil war, Carlists Wars. Spain declared war on Morocco over the tribesmen attacks on Ceuta and won. Morocco paid reparations and additionally ceded a small town in the south, Sidi Ifni, as a fishing post. From there, the Spanish went further south, establishing a new colony, the Spanish Sahara. They were not giving up on their imperial appetite, but the time came to lose its last possessions in the Caribbean. The Cuban War of Independence started. After the US intervened, Cuba succeeded. The Spanish-American War began. Eventually, Spain lost Puerto Rico and was forced to sell the Philippines. Guam was also ceded to the US. In 1899, Spain sold its remaining Pacific claims to Germany to add to German New Guinea. France invaded and occupied Morocco, and Spain gained control over the north. World War I? Spain maintained neutrality. Instead, it fought the Rif War with Berbers in Morocco. In this war, the Spanish army deployed chemical weapons in an attempt to pacify the region. Over 15,000 toxic gas bombs each day, targeting civilian populations, markets, and rivers. They justified the usage of gas by dehumanizing the natives as uncivilized beings, malicious beasts. Spain held elections, became a republic again, and the king fled the country. One of the veterans of the Rif War, General Francis Franco, led his African army against the Republicans, fearing that the new republic was sliding towards a Soviet-style revolution that would destroy traditional Spain. With the support of Nazi Germany, Franco won the Spanish Civil War, usurped power, and became the authoritarian leader of Spain until his death in 1975. The war caused around 500,000 deaths. And World War II? Officially neutral, again, didn't declare war on anybody, but supported Hitler and Mussolini. Franco even switched the clock ahead to match the time of the Axis powers to make coordination easier. It has remained so ever since. As a result, Spain has late sunsets and has developed a culture of late dinners. Pretty cool, to be honest. But late sunrise too, like 7:30. Now on Kyiv, the sun rises at 5:50. Dark mornings. Exactly, there is always a trade-off. France and Spain recognized Morocco's independence. Spain recognized the independence of Equatorial Guinea. The Moroccan enclave of Sidi Ifni has been ceded to Morocco. Franco's dictatorship ended, and Spain gave up the Spanish Sahara to Morocco and Mauritania. The latter eventually withdrew its claims, but Morocco did not, and the conflict over Western Sahara remains unresolved to this day. Under its current constitution, Spain is a constitutional monarchy with the king of the Bourbon dynasty. It comprises 17 communities, all of which are autonomous, and 2 autonomous cities, Ceuta and Melilla. Like all autonomous? Federation? No, it is still a unitary state, but very decentralized, which is contradicting, I know. Each community has a legislative parliament and a government, and some of the regions don't even really pay taxes to the central government. Like Basque Country and Navarre, They just pay some quota for defense services and foreign affairs. They even have their own police. The national Spanish police units are very limited there. But how? Why? This was created deliberately with the Constitution of 1978 to recognize Spain's historical, cultural and linguistic diversity while still keeping the country united. Initially, only a few communities demanded autonomy, but the tendency spread and eventually all wanted to be autonomous. Catalonia even tried to become independent in 2017. It was huge, but Spain could not let it happen. No way. Of course. Spain joined NATO, and in 4 years, the European Economic Community, which is now the European Union. Schengen zone in 1995 and adopted the euro as its currency in 2002. Questions? Official languages? Standard Spanish or Castilian is the only official language of the state. Some communities have only co-official languages, like Galician in Galicia, Catalan in Catalonia. I see. Okay. Also, you mentioned it is the second most visited country. Indeed, after France, Spain has 50 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, one of the highest, and other natural wonders, Balearic Islands of the Mediterranean, and the surrealistic beauty of the Canary Islands. Wow. And what have you learned that caught your eye about Spain? I didn't know that siesta is a Spanish word. Really? I thought it was an Italian thing in general, but actually it's a global thing, resting during the hours of the extreme heat during the day. But the word siesta is actually Spanish. It comes from the Latin sexta, meaning the 6th hour, the hour of the day when the hottest part of the day hits. I see. Okay, so my grandparents from the south of Ukraine, after lunch, used to take a siesta too? Exactly, it's a global thing. Just that Spain has this nice little word for it that became famous, same as fiesta, which they used to describe whether it's a national holiday festival or a small party with friends at home. But because their festivals attracted international attention, the stereotype Spain is an all-day-long fiesta was born. I got you. What else? Sunshine duration in the south is one of the longest across Europe, 260 sunny days per year. For comparison, Kiev has 160. No. Spanish flu, have you heard of it? Some kind of pandemic? One of the deadliest actually. Occurred during World War I, but not in Spain, contrary to popular opinion. Spain was neutral in World War I, so there was no press censorship. Spanish newspapers reported the illness openly, and that's why the world called it Spanish flu. Also, Испанский стыд, literally Spanish shame, but there is no such phrase in the English language. And I was like, why? But in the Russian-speaking countries it came to describe a deep feeling of embarrassment you get for someone else when they do something awkward or cringe. Why Spanish? Exactly, it's weird, right? But it turned out it's because of the cheap, low-quality Spanish-speaking TV soap operas that were broadcast on our TV back in the 90s and 2000s. The actors' performances were so bad that people watching felt deeply ashamed themselves. The Spanish call it vergüenza ajena, ashamed for somebody else. It's just funny that we call it Spanish shame. And you know what blows my mind the most? Tell me. That over 600 million people worldwide speak Spanish. Quite impressive, yeah? But the thing is, they could have spoken Portuguese.